It is why I'm here today. It is one of those epiphanies. We talk about epiphanies. They can be silent, they can be bigger and more jarring. This was one of the more jarring sort of break your mind epiphanies. And I think in the life of transformation, we need both.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we are coming home still today to ourselves. We've got an amazing story of transformation I think a lot of you will be inspired by. And
yeah, this is a concept that both of us, I feel, we've both moved around a lot. Like you separately, me separately, us together. And as a child, moving around from place to place forced me to come home to myself over and over again and find that feeling of home within myself, no matter where I was, no matter where we were heading. And the same thing is true when I travel. It's the same coming home to myself. What do I need to feel at home within my own being?
Yes, and we get to hear about a big shift in somebody's life, and I always love those. They're always really, really powerful. And so before we get started, though, I've seen my guitar, but I can't. Where the hell are those drums? There they are. Today's review of the week comes from M. Vayner. I literally can't get enough of this podcast! ! I find Adi and Sophie so real, introspective, insightful, and profound, and also relatable. Between themselves and their incredible, extremely well curated guests, they have the most deep conversations that explore all the many facets that you'd want to know, giving you insane perspective and helpful insights to help you live in a more connected, aligned, and fulfilled manner. Damn, I want to listen to this podcast. I literally am obsessed with each and every conversation as they are both so knowledgeable, open-minded, and humble, creating both safe and comforting experience while also helping to elevate your consciousness, deepen your self-awareness, increase compassion for yourself and others, and live a more fulfilled life.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for that, M. Vayner. I always want to know these people's names. You've won this week's amazing care package. So we get to make your life even deeper, more conscientious, and elevated by giving you our Ignited and Philosophy care packages. Find us on at ignited.me, info at Ignited, all those places, and we will send you your stuff.
And remember, if you're listening and you haven't left a review yet, chances are pretty good that we will read your review on air if you leave a good one. So, I mean, sometimes we also read the bad ones.
Yeah,
so
we've read some really bad ones.
Just know that if you leave an honest review, there's a really good chance. Just make sure you leave your review on Apple Podcasts. And that is the place that we usually pull the reviews from, just so you know. And then if we read it on air, you get to contact us and we will send you an amazing care package.
It could be you. And with that, we're leading into Sophie's incredible quote of the week.
When we embody her, we play it safe, hold back our voices, and don't share our true gifts with the world. And this is an excerpt from our guest today, Majo Molfino's book, How to Break the Good Girl Myth.
Yeah, and this is, again, like what an incredible transformation. We get to talk about one of those oh my God moments that somebody experiences and it changes the entire trajectory of their life. And I love those moments.
Yeah, and we can learn so much from sharing those moments with each other because we all learn in different ways. We all have different rock bottoms. We all have different ways that we absorb information and learn and grow and change and transform. And my transformation doesn't have to look like yours, and it shouldn't, but we can all learn by sharing these experiences.
Yeah. And one of the reasons this is one of my favorite episodes in a while is Majo shares something she hasn't talked about publicly before. It's always a treat when we get to have that. And you and Majo kind of talk about a similar experience in the sense of kind of having this mind-blowing experience. And I'll just leave it at that so everybody can kind of listen as we explore this farther. But
yep. And we also talk about polarities in relationships, which is something Adi and I have really been focusing on in the last year or so. We talk about masculine versus feminine roles. And again, that's not masculine as in a male and feminine as in a female. It can be, but most of the time it's that we all contain, that pink energy, that blue energy, the masculine, the feminine, and how to balance that and find that polarity.
Absolutely. We talk about
setting boundaries,
perfectionism, and how to move forward in a way that respects your creativity without stifling you. There's a little bit of everything in this episode for y'all. Really, really excited to get you to meet
Hope you
Majo.
love it and coming home to yourself once again. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the conversation portion of today's amazing episode. We've got Majo Molfino with us, the author of How to Break the Good Girl Myth. I can imagine the conversation that we're about to have going a million different ways. And so I'm really, really excited to get into what is the good girl myth? How do you break it? Soph, I know you'll have a lot to say when it comes to this stuff. And so this will be a really, really fun conversation. And you even made Sophie take a quiz, which is, I can't make my wife take a quiz for anything. So I'm really, really excited to kind of for you guys to talk about the results. But let's start out. Tell us your background story. Tell our listeners, how'd you get to the point where you wrote that book? What was coming up for you in life? And, how'd you get here?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. So I really started out being a good girl from the moment I came out of the womb. No, just kidding. I actually was very creative and free-spirited when I was younger. And slowly, as I started going to school and learning about the sacrifice my parents made, being immigrants, I started molding myself and being molded into sort of cookie cutter, straight A student. I did classical jazz ballet. I played classical piano. I did jazz ballet. I just was, prototypical good girl growing up my whole life. And I like to say that eventually caught up to me. I think it catches up to so many women. For some women, it catches up to them in their 20s, for some much later in life. And the moment that it really changed for me was I was working at a corporate job outside of Washington, D.C. And I had just finished a really long day. And I remember I have this vivid moment or memory of going out into the elevator, and the elevators were mirrors, and staring at myself in those mirrors. And first of all, not recognizing myself, but secondly, feeling like I was wearing a costume. And that it was the first time that I thought, oh my God, I'm playing a game and I'm playing a role. And just like you can take off a costume, you can take off this role. And it was I like to say it was a very quiet epiphany. Sometimes we think of epiphanies as these really loud, crazy, near-death experiences, but they can also happen in those silent moments. And for me, it was just looking at myself in the eyes and saying something isn't right. And from there, a lot of things changed. And it was a process of deconditioning and unfolding these good girl tendencies so that I could show up in the world.
I love it. What do you think allowed you? A lot of people have had those thoughts, right? Looking at themselves and going, how did I end up in this life? This isn't my life. This is not the right fit. I'm wearing a costume. I'm living somebody else's existence. And then still saying, yeah, but change is going to be a little too scary and I'm afraid of it, and just continuing to move in that direction. And I know you talk about this a lot, and we'll talk about it a lot here today, there were a lot of pressures to stay on track, relationship pressures, family pressures, economic pressures, etc. What do you think allowed you in that moment to go, I need to figure out how to change this?
I think when I was in a moment in my life of suffering. I was breaking out on my skin. I was having a lot of anxiety. I was going to therapy for the first time. I was living at my parents' place. And I think I was hitting this moment of pain that prompted change.
Got it.
And I think people are, I think that is one of if you're someone who's listening right now and you're feeling uncomfortable and you're feeling like you're in a moment of discomfort, I think that is a sign to you that change is imminent, and that's good news. So for me, it was a process, I ended up quitting that job and then moving out to California, but going back into a similar job. And I like to tell people this, if whether you're in a toxic job or toxic relationship, it doesn't happen overnight. There is going to be a push and pull. You're going to fall back into it. That's okay. Be patient with yourself. It can take a few months, if not years, to unravel and come completely out. And I know you guys do work on addiction and other stuff. Like it's messy. It's not like epiphany and then done. Right. And so, so for me, it was a process, and then quitting that job. And eventually, I ended up going to Burning Man, which was a huge experience for me. Have you guys been?
We haven't. We will. We'll make it there.
Okay. I wonder what it's going to be like now that there's COVID. But Burning Man was, for those of you who don't know, it's a counterculture festival. It happens out in the desert. It's a place, I like to think of it as a social experiment. It's a place where the rules that you think of that we live in day-to-day society no longer apply to the same degree. So a lot of people are creatively expressing, they're experimenting with their relationships, they're experimenting with their bodies. And it was the first time that I was able to step outside of any kind of system. That really helped me continue to deprogram and unravel. And I can dive into what happened there if you guys want, if that's interesting to your audience. Yeah.
So
For sure.
So I think we'll definitely dive into it. But I think what I'm hearing that was important and was relevant was you had this thought and was repeating. You even say about yourself, right? I'm a good girl in serious recovery. Which kind of speaks back to this recovery, mental health, addiction language. But there were pressures. And it wasn't until you ended up in a place where you went, oh shit, I'm not the only one. Like there are, if you're talking about Burning Man, there's thousands or tens of thousands of people who are also fighting against these same rules. And if I'm hearing you right, if I can fight against these rules here, and there are other people who are fighting against these rules here, why can't I take these same lessons into my everyday life? Why do I have to pretend? Because there are a lot of people, by the way, who are doing that with Burning Man, right? They go to Burning Man, they live a life they hate, and they all year, they're prepping their bicycles with fur, and they're getting their costumes ready.
Yeah.
And the RV is outfitted, because it's like they can survive the whole year hating their life if they can just have their 2 weeks in Burning Man. And
they're missing the point. Yeah.
Yeah, but you took it into the real world, which is a huge step.
I think because I was hungry for purpose. I was like, what am I here to do on the planet? What is the legacy I'm going to leave behind? And I think I had that moment at Burning Man where I was like, because I had the layers of good girl start to peel away, was like, okay, I can now see that I'm here to be creative and I'm here to support other people in their creative purpose, particularly women. That clarity emerged from that experience. But if I had been going along with the program, it's like you have to remove yourself to get the insight. But then, of course, you have to come back to the world and bring and implement the insight. And I think we're seeing that a lot with people who do meditation and mindfulness. It's like, okay, you're going to go into your cave in the Himalayas and meditate for 2 weeks. It's like, don't let it stop there. Come back, integrate it.
Yep. Yeah.
So you teased us. I got to go there because I got to ask what happened in Burning Man.
Yeah. So at Burning Man, I met a very interesting character. He was an older man. And he basically invited me to try substance I hadn't tried before. And as a good girl, I was like, oh my gosh, I possibly couldn't do that. I mean, we're talking about, obviously, if I could put it plainly, it was a psychedelic. Yeah. And, it's interesting when I tell people about this story because they see me as very proper, like I went to a good school or whatever. But that's really just my own good girl mentality trying to protect my ego when I tell this story. Basically, I had this very pivotal experience with him. I took this medicine and it broke the structures of my mind. And in that moment, I was able to see that I was creative and powerful in a way that I hadn't before. Do I recommend everyone go to Burning Man and drop acid? Nope. I think it's really important to do it mindfully, intentionally, ceremonially. I feel like I did. And that came out in the result that is my life that I have, redesigned. That's a story, by the way, I don't share in my book, Break the Good Girl Myth, but I am sharing with you, because I feel like your audience may connect with it.
Yeah. And weirdly, that's what we do on this podcast is we make people talk about things they don't normally talk about.
Yeah. Bring it out.
And by the way, I have the same stance, right? Like hallucinogens have absolutely played a role, by the way, not a straight linear role in any means, but a role in opening up my mind to what's possible in the world. And it's the same sort of stance that I take for people. I'm like, look, they did a lot for me. They're still my favorite experiences that I've ever had. And I don't recommend them because you have to be in a place where you make a choice. They're like, it's like a portal. It's a way to open up your world. And the thing is, you don't really know what it's opening it up to. You just kind of have to step in and you lose complete control over the discussion once you open up the portal. So it's very bizarre, incredibly powerful offering almost. But you have to be ready and you have to be willing to deal with whatever is after, okay, now I'm on a mission to write a book and change the course for women all over the world, which you weren't planning on before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think it opened me up in a way that, it is why I'm here today. It is one of those epiphanies. We talk about epiphanies. They can be silent, they can be bigger and more jarring. This was one of the more jarring sort of break your mind epiphanies. And I think in the life of transformation, we need both.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And we need to try lots of different things that do scare us. We have to try lots of different experiences. We need to let our minds, our hearts, our physical body go into different modes, we talk about this all the time. And how do I live an ignited life? One of those things is trying new things constantly. Mm-hmm. And sometimes under that umbrella is drugs. Sometimes it's places like Burning Man. Sometimes it's all sorts of things, but that is one extreme case that works when you're in a safe place. It's controlled, it's treated ceremonially, it's treated with intention. Just like a lot of other things in our lives, things can be poisonous and they can be medicine to our spirits and our souls and our lives.
Yeah. And if I'm honest, it's probably a slight shirking of responsibility to say to people, I don't recommend it, because really what I'm saying is, look, I don't know what your experience will be and whether you will come out of it feeling enlightened or as if you just suffered for 12 hours for no reason. So I don't want to take that on as a burden for myself.
For sure.
I mean, you just had an experience in a relatively recent past self, and it was deep and amazing and uncomfortable all at once.
Yeah, it wasn't really that deep. I think I took LSD with friends for the first time. I've taken mushrooms multiple times and, I felt like I knew what I was doing. I was with best friends. We were on a trip in Santa Barbara and it felt right. But I'm not really at a point in my life where I'm needing that sort of breaking of my brain, of my existence. I do the work. I'm spiritually connected. I show up to myself. I face all the challenges. I love my partnership. All I wanted to do the whole time was come home. And it wasn't necessarily a bad trip in that I was flipping out and hallucinating. It was just I just wanted to come home and it wouldn't end. And I was like, this isn't ending. And it's been so long. It's been 12 hours and all I want are my babies and my husband and my home. And, and so it's in that moment, it was my poison. And do I now say I'm never doing that again? No, but I know now what I'm dealing with. Yeah. For me, I have other substances that work as my medicine because I have a different healing need right now. Yeah. I don't need the the LSD experience of like mind altering, because I'm in a really beautiful grounded place in my life where I am doing the work in different ways. So I think it really is, like Adi's saying, a very personal evaluation of like, what does my system need? Like, am I needing a mind blowing experience? LSD can be that. Or am I just needing like connection with my partner? Or am I just needing like to quit my job? Like there's just different elements to big experiences in our lives that can open the door to magical transformation. And this is one of the many tools that can take us there.
I love that. It's like inviting people to have the wisdom to see what phase in life am I in and what tool is appropriate
100%.
for that.
So you're there, you have this magical experience and you walk out with this insight into your own life. My guess is you had the insight into your own life, create a change, and then you went to write about it and go, oh my God, this was incredible for me. More people should have this experience. Can you walk us through? So after you're there, like it sounds like there was a lot to change.
Yeah. One of the first things I realized right off the bat was I had been suppressing my creativity my whole life. And that was because I always wanted to be like my father. My father was a researcher. He was a scientist, and he was the one who had gotten us out of our country. We immigrated from Argentina. So it was like, I always had this idealized image of my father. And it was only until I was able to say, oh my gosh, because my mother, interestingly, is an artist, to say, oh, I've been suppressing all this artistry and creativity inside of me. What's up with that? And why have I done that? And realizing so much of it was good girl conditioning, which is I wanted it to be perfect. And by perfect, what are the standards from a societal perspective? Is like you're a top earner, you're having a conventional job. That's how it manifested for me. Yeah. I wanted to be logical. I wanted to be really critical thinker, very analytical. I wanted evidence and be empirical based. And so it was like that, it was all the things that were covering up the creativity. So it was a process of reclaiming that creativity that totally changed my life. And that's when I decided to study design. And I never thought I would study design because I thought I was going to be a neuroscientist. And learning design thinking was revolutionary. I got my master's in learning design and technology from Stanford University. I built so much creative confidence through that program. I learned what it means to take an idea and put it into form. I got exposed to some of the best professors, best students, best research. It was just incredible learning ecosystem that catapulted me to the next phase of my life. And from there, I started to support women in their creative confidence and in applying the design thinking process to life, to our purpose, to how we want our careers to be.
Okay. So now you got to tell us about this design process, because I'm like, wait, what am I not doing in my life? Walk us through. What is that process like? At least big picture, right?
Design thinking is a process that came out of the Stanford Design School, but also a lot of firms like IDEO and Frog use it. Basically, it's a method of taking an idea and bringing it into form. There are a lot of steps to it. The first is empathy. The second is ideation. Third is prototyping, then testing, and then you loop back around. But I think the place that I want to really zoom into, if I were to zoom into any part of the design thinking process to be like, this is the part that is most empowering. For me, it's been prototyping, particularly for, in my book, I talk about the myth of perfection, which a lot of us have. We are sitting on gold. We're sitting on ideas for weeks, months, years. If you are able to learn the process of smart experimentation and action, which is prototyping, you can actually bring those ideas to life way sooner than you think. And so I'm a huge fan of prototyping. I'm happy to dive into that more specifically if it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the more kind of like heart of this is that this is what inspired your book. And this is what inspired portions of like the test we took. So I do want to kind of get into the beef of that, just because we want to hear more about your book, and we took the test, and so I want to get into that.
Yeah. And maybe even how learning about this process allowed you to go and now be creative and be out there helping people, versus I think what a lot of people think, when they go to write a book, it's like, oh shit, I'm going to have to spend the next 7 years researching this book, then going out and living out in the field, and then another 10 years to write it. So it's the best book that it could ever be.
And then the moment passes and then it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about is a very different way of looking at it. I literally just today wrote an email for our email list about perfectionism. So I love the serendipity of this, but walk us through that. How did this learning about this process affect your work and how you got here?
Mm-hmm. So when I started coaching with women, I noticed a pattern right away. In the design, let me back up. In the design thinking process, there's also the first step, which is empathy. Empathy is really being able to understand somebody else's experience deeply, which is what you both are doing with me right now in this interview. So through deep empathy work with my clients, the women I coached, I started to see the same patterns again and again. The same things were blocking women over and over again, not just my clients, but women who were sending me comments from the podcast, my friends, my family. There are so many examples, even in pop culture, of these 5 good girl myths. That's what I called them. It's what I developed. And one of these good girl myths has been the myth of perfection. And it's my primary good girl myth, which we alluded to. And it's the one that I really focus on in my work, particularly with design thinking and prototyping. So how did I take that and use it for the book? Well, first thing that I tell people that it kind of blows their mind, the book started with a 1-pager. The 1-pager was a visual representation of the book that I showed agents, and I showed people who had published books, other authors. It was my prototype of the book. And so I didn't go out and do a really extensive outline. I didn't go out and, write the whole book or whatever. I just did a 1-pager. And it was something that I could get feedback on within an hour from somebody, even less time. They could see it within a glance and give me feedback within 20 minutes. And so I've used prototyping in my own making of the book. I've used empathy work in my own making of the book. And I think that's been important because I believe in thinking like a designer and creating like a designer, not just, talking about it.
I love that. I love this is what you get. This is the 1-pager. This is what I'm thinking. Are we on the same page? And it just takes a lot of you could have easily made an outline for 6 months. You could have easily worked on the table of contents, but that's not the heart of it. Mm-hmm. The heart of it is what's on that prototype. The heart of it is something that someone can feel right away if it's a good fit or not. And if it's right for you and if it feels like it's in alignment, and then you can take it to the next step. But instead of wasting 6 months of your life, which I think a lot of us do when we become perfectionistic about our ideas, is we don't allow it to, be exposed to people that we trust, that we love, mm-hmm. that we respect, because we're so afraid of negative feedback.
Well, I think the idea is also we think we have to get it right before anybody sees it.
Right.
And I think the magic of part of this is that, first of all, there is no fucking right, number one. So that's a shock for a lot of people. And the second piece is you get so riled up, and there are a lot of myths, and I want to go through them at some point here today because I want to go over all 5, at least by naming them. But if you think that if you work at this long enough, you'll make the book for everybody, you've set yourself up for failure from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And there can be death by committee overall at some point where you just get so many different voices and you allow it to completely stifle your own creative process, which then it's not your book anymore. It's now become sort of like amalgamation of however many different people's opinion you got about what you should do. So you created this 1-page when you showed it around as kind of like iteration number 1 of what you wanted this book to be.
Exactly. Here's my initial concept. I've put this together in less than 24 hours. What do you think, prospective agent? What do you think, published author? What do you think, intended reader? Give me your feedback, and then from there I was like, oh, what's resonated? What hasn't resonated? Let me iterate on it. And then I built my way forward. I think people wrapping your head around building your way forward into the unknown is kind of a hard thing. But it's like, instead of thinking I have to have it all figured out, plan it out, everything for, 6 months, it's like, do something small, start where you are. And then as you learn, course correct and build your way forward. It's going to change. That's the shift. And for a lot of women that I work with, they're, a lot of them wait for clarity, or they do a lot of, they might do a lot of journaling, meditation. I love that stuff. I'm all about it. I think inner work is so important, but it can't stop there. You have to do smart experimentation and action.
Yep.
And I really believe in the beauty of prototyping and engaging with the world, engage with material, engage with people,
And take a risk.
Take a risk.
It's a lot safer to sit behind, your computer for a year and be like, I'm going to work on this thing. And then like something happens and it deters you. It's like, let's just get it out there.
Yeah. I think, and what I really love about this messaging is whether people listening right now don't feel safe in the kitchen, or they're experimenting sexually or with drugs or with books, or I don't know, with whatever, the next car they may drive, or, poetry. It doesn't matter what realm of life we're talking about. If you sit around and try to aim until you get it perfectly, odds are you're never going to do anything. And so the idea that I'm hearing you putting out there is like, give it your best first shot, and then get it out there, and then iterate. Mm-hmm. It could be a recipe.
Yeah. And it takes humility to get feedback and filter it, because not all feedback is good, Who am I getting that feedback from? What is their context and perspective? Like all of that matters. So I always want to be careful too, when I work with women, like not to, if they put themselves out there and they hear crickets, or if they put themselves out there and they get negative feedback, that's information for them, right? Like to neutralize it is so, it's hard, but it's so important, because again, you're thinking like a designer, like how do I design this to be like the best experience for someone, or the best product or service, or, whatever it is you want to create. So yeah, I think filtering feedback is really important, and all part of the process as well.
Yeah, I want to just get into the good girl test that you have in there. So I took the test today. And
what'd you get?
I was a mix between D and E. Not all of them applied to me. Like it just wasn't real for me and didn't feel true. So I just did the ones that felt like, oh, that's me. So I got 4 for harmony and 7 for sacrifice.
Okay. Awesome. And
Sophie
shall we define these?
The myth of rules.
I know that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, the myth of harmony is when we seek harmony instead of embracing conflict and confrontation needed for change. Is this something that
the funny thing is that's probably why I only have 4 for it, because I actually am very confrontational. I have no problem telling people what I feel, what I think, if I think it's going to benefit the friendship, their growth, and so I actually didn't resonate with the ones for harmony that were like being scared of confrontation. But I think I like people to feel good. I want people, when I host, I'm like making sure everyone's happy. I want everyone to get along. If I see the D's feeling a little off because of someone else, then I want to fix it. And I just want everyone to be happy and be in a place of love. So I definitely work hard to create experiences so that people feel held and happy. I just want people to feel good if they're in my life.
Is there a cost to you for that?
Occasionally. I'd say, if I start to make it imbalanced and I start to care a little too much what's going on for other people, if I start to get, like, let's say on my vacation, we had like a whole thing with our nanny and our friend who came with us and her little, boyfriend guy. And then my husband and I suffered for it. So like my vacation for the first month was sacrificed because I was so focused on helping everyone else on my family vacation. So, there's times where it becomes so imbalanced. And that's when I asked my partner for help and said, like, I need you to step in.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to allow the second week of vacation to go this way too.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to take these things over. And I started to delegate some tasks to him and letting him to step into his power as the father of our children instead of me handling everything. So it's a fine balance, but I'd say for the most part, I really like being the harmonious one and bringing love and peace and bringing the one that brings all the people together for social events. I plan everything for us. I like that. As long as it's not an imbalance and like once in a while he surprises us with something nice, right?
I love that. I say that about all 5 good girl myths. It's like none of them are inherently bad. Rules, perfection, harmony, logic, like it's all about balance and context.
Yeah.
Are we choosing this quality or are we defaulting into it?
Yeah.
And there are moments where you're choosing it. And there are moments where you noticed you defaulted into it and it created an imbalance.
And I think even having like, I want to be the one, I've always wanted to have a home that felt like people were in and out and felt at home here and could come sleep here when they needed a place to crash or some love from a family. Like I want to be that, but also it's not my job. So like if I have a friend who we're no longer friends, she's 35 years old and she'd bring her laundry here regularly. And I'm like, I mean, I've got 3 kids. Like I think
the thing that's important to know,
Yeah.
and you definitely have developed the voice to express it, but you do take that on for a while. So it'll build up and eventually it comes out in a sharper way than it would have maybe otherwise because of this, the 5th myth, the sacrifice.
Yeah.
Because
I was going to say, this sounds more like the myth of sacrifice. Even your flavor of harmony is leaning towards sacrifice.
Yeah.
Sophie definitely has a piece to her where in order for others to to feel good, she may have to give up some of her opportunities to feel good. And this played, I mean, we're talking currently about past relationships, and there have been places where that played out explicitly, where to make the partner feel good, her needs couldn't be considered. And then, I mean, we can talk about your childhood because you guys both moved around a lot. I moved around a little bit, but you guys moved around a lot.
I saw you moved around a lot too. I moved every year from when my parents divorced to when that was 2nd grade. And I didn't spend more than 2 years in a specific location. And that meant I changed schools as well.
Until like high school.
I mean, through high school till college. Yeah. So it's something where you then learn to, how do I respond and react to the outside world? And you turn to perfectionism, where I turn to like pleasing others and making sure my brother was happy and making sure my mom was happy and connecting with my dad and making sure he was happy and just kind of making sure that I felt like I was the glue that kept everyone together, and that harmonious, like, and at what expense? At my own sacrifice, because like, why wasn't anyone putting anything back into me? Why am I the one outputting all this energy and love?
So I imagine for you, it's been a process of learning boundaries. Yes. Is that right?
That's actually a funny joke. No, literally, I think in the last 2 to 3 years, I've learned boundaries for the first time. I understood it conceptually, maybe when I hit 30. Now at 36, I think in the last 2 years, I'm actually practicing boundaries, and it's amazing. I'm in awe. Like if anyone is questioning whether or not you should learn about boundaries or not, highly recommend it. It's very, what's this?
I literally have a deck of cards here in front of me about how to plan for, like, understand your own boundaries, then communicate them to others. And we do that as a workshop.
I need that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that workshop.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like I just wanted to reflect something to you, because you said that you're pretty strong in your voice, and it sounds like you don't have trouble with the confrontational piece. I could see that being a sort of a superpower when exerting boundaries, that could be a way that you could really, because they're related, with a lot of women I work with who have harmony and sacrifice as a couplet. Part of the thing is, how do I use my voice and speak up for myself and exert that boundary so I reclaim my time and energy, right? So I can reclaim the time and energy, which are my precious resources.
Yeah. Especially with 3 kids.
Yeah. And I think it's because I didn't ever learn boundaries, nor did I ever voice my boundaries, because I wasn't aware of what they were until they were crossed. That is where I had great suffering. And that's why, like Adi said, like the friend that did laundry, and I was just like, okay, well, she needs to do it. Maybe she shouldn't have quarters. It's like, after a long period, like that should have been a boundary. The first time she asked, I should have been like, no, I'd prefer you not. And it would have been no big deal. But instead I didn't know that was a boundary until it went on too long. So I think it's, for me, the learning of boundaries has been when it's been crossed, when I've been hit, when I've been raped, when I've been like misjudged, when I've been cheated on, when I've been like these experience yelled at, or my mom like chasing me around with a hairbrush, like that doesn't feel good. Like, it's like, it has to be such an extreme boundary for me to understand, that went too far.
Yeah. I call that red lines in our work. We call it, somebody will eventually cross your boundaries and will fully break them. And then you have to figure out how to put the pieces together. And what I hear in your harmony, good girl myth is that, and I do see this definitely in a lot of women and some men as well, but in a lot of, for men, there is well, if you assert yourself, it's good, right? The good guy myth is that, well, if you stand your ground. And so maybe men experience this a little bit less, at least in terms of social pressure. But I always say we all have boundaries. You may not know what they are. You have them. And then someday, if you don't pay attention, if you don't define them for yourself and understand them, somebody's going to cross them. And you learn the moment they cross your boundary, you'll be like, oh shit, this is not okay. But you've never talked to anybody about what's okay and what's not okay. So now it comes out of this left field. Nobody understands why you're even having the conversation.
Yeah, that's why in the book, in the chapter on the myth of sacrifice, I talk a lot about women taking back their calendar, because for me, that's like putting the intentional pieces in place so that you're not reactive when someone comes to you with a request, and you can really look at, what did I already say I wanted to do this week or a month that's aligned with my deeper why and purpose? How does this request line up with that? Right. I think a lot of women need to take, I think we need to take back our calendars, because otherwise people are just going to steal your time. It's just constant,
Yeah, I think this definitely has been something, Soph, that you've done more in the last few years, like having your own time. And even we talked about this before. So I work, Sophie works. And then there was definitely this balance got created that it was certainly expected. We have help, but it was certainly expected that when the help wasn't there or when there was nobody else to cover, Sophie was going to be the one that steps in, right? That's kind of like a very
social norm,
a very common social norm for heterosexual couples that are parenting. And so we had to really talk through it for a while. And Sophie said, well, how does this work? Like, how do I you get to work till 5 or 6 PM if you need to in your office. What do I get? And there came this moment where this is about boundaries and communicating. And instead of harmony, saying, hey, I need an hour. You just got off work and I've been here for 2.5 hours with the kids since the nanny got off. I need an hour. So you're on kid duty right now and I'm going to go away and do my work. And it took a long time, for us to figure out that agreement. Secondly, for you to feel like it was okay to vocalize it. Because again, I feel like that myth of, we're not fighting terribly about it. So how can I just sacrifice more and more and more and deal with it?
Well, the boundary had to be so crossed where I was stretched my complete edge. I'm like, I'm giving fully to the kids. I'm giving fully to our house chores. I'm giving fully to my work. I'm giving to our bank account and I'm giving to this relationship. How did I now decide? Like, there's nothing left to give. So again, unfortunately, it went to that red zone of my boundary being so crossed. And so over the last 10 years of being parents, I've learned how to vocalize, hey, we're at that edge right now. I need you to show up and be an equal partner. And it's interesting because I'm trying so deeply with our kids now. They're 2, 8, and 10. And I want to teach them now because nobody taught me. I learned how to use my voice because my mom, my stepmom, and my dad used their voice, but no one taught me what to speak about. No one taught me about boundaries. I just knew how to be an empowered woman because that's what they did. And I knew how to march for my rights, but I didn't know what my rights are, like it was like this disconnect. So I know how to use my voice, but I don't know what my boundaries are. So we're trying to teach our kids now some things that are really important. Like our 10-year-old had an experience. We were visiting something in Santa Fe and we were out at this beautiful hot springs and this man physically picked him up and moved him. And I mean, this is in the time of COVID, right? So it's even more like a weird thing to do. He picked Kai up and he touched him and he moved him physically and said something funny. And my sister looked at him and said, Kai, did you give him permission to touch you? And he said, no. And she said, okay, did it bother you? Or did you feel funny with him putting his hands on you? And he's a complete stranger. And he was like, yeah. And she said, okay, I'm going to need you to speak up and say this is your body.
Yeah. Wow. I just got chills. Yeah.
And like, if we can teach these skills, he's a 10-year-old boy, but if we can teach those skills now, you need to speak up for what you need. And there was another experience where he passed out on set because he won't say, I'm thirsty, or I need to sit down, or I'm feeling lightheaded, because he's such a people pleaser. Not okay. You just passed out. So like these lessons that we're trying to help them to see the gifts in that, and that, okay, now you know what it feels like when you're about to pass out. You need to use your voice to say, I need a minute. Even if there's 4 cameras on you, even if it feels like such an intense moment, everything can wait. And if you're passed out, then we're out an entire day of shooting. So, so it's all of these like small moments that my parents weren't watching me at that level. They weren't a part of my life in that way. They were, divorced, and my mom had multiple jobs. She wasn't around. I was a latchkey kid. So I just put the pieces together, as opposed to our kids. We can be hyper-focused on their growth and take that moment and say, look at this experience. How can we be different as we grow, right?
I love that so much, because I feel like you laying down that groundwork for him now, or supporting him in that, you're saving him so much of a headache when he's, 30, 40, and then he's going to have to be like in tune with his needs and then vocalizing them. Yeah. I mean, it's big, something that I'm working on just to be like vulnerable is like, with food, it's been like, I always disconnected from my body. I was always such a hyperachiever. I never wanted to pause to eat, and like, you talking about the red zone, it's like, if I don't eat, I get into a red zone where I can't even function anymore. And so now it's been tuning into the body, listening to okay, there's hunger. Even if there isn't hunger, have I eaten the last 2 hours?
Exactly.
Have I nourished my body? And, so I think we're all learning sort of the lessons, as an adult, I'm learning that. And I almost wish I had as a child,
Totally. It's all the same messaging. It's an unlearning. It's a relearning. It's an unlearning. It's a relearning. And it's, where are my spots? We all have room to grow. No one is perfect. It just doesn't exist. Perfect does not exist. So if we all have room to grow, it's a constant work in progress. And that's just our lives. It's not a bad thing. If you don't think it's a good thing, fine, but it just is the constant work in progress. So where can I start to rearrange? And when you have a lot of balls in the air, you got to really start to pay attention and have awareness of yourself. Like, okay, I'm doing great in these areas. Where do I need some help and some fine tuning in these other areas? And so a test like this can help you really see your blind spots. And, it's just a mirror, just like anything else. These are all just mirrors to knowing more about ourselves.
I love that. I like to say that the good girl archetype is universal, but we each have our own unique flavor of her. And like for you, it sounds like sacrifice has been really the work that you've been working on. For me, it's been perfection. But I meet women who are really, still feeling stuck in the myth of rules. They've done what everyone, they've still are sort of buried under the layers of expectations of their family or their religion, or their whatever school or training they got. It's like, it's been interesting to also meet women who are very deep in logic, that maybe they don't really have a connection to their body, or don't believe in this other form of intelligence. They only believe in the sort of more cerebral, like what is, I can see is what is true, prove it to me.
And that's been such it's such an interesting juxtaposition for a D&I, because he is like rules, perfection, and logic. And I am 0 for all of those. And I am harmony and sacrifice. So it's interesting how different we are, just as you learn about your love language or.
So you guys must have a lot of polarity between you two, which probably is like amazing and is how a lot of things work in relationships. I'm curious, do you guys talk on your podcast? Do you use the language of masculine and feminine energies or anything like that?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We do. Yeah. And Yeah, I think that polarity is actually really important because foundationally we're so similar. So actually the polarity is where the sexiness is, and polarity is where the exciting new things and the creativity comes in. If we were just agreeing with each other all the time, it would be really boring. So there's beauty in that, but also it's a source of conflict at times.
Yeah, because I can imagine that there's probably like, I like to say that in the patriarchy for men and women, the distortion's a little different, right? Like for men, it's almost like we're taught to be alpha, and like the distortion is more towards an overdrive. And for women, the distortion is more towards like a sort of weakness, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And a submission.
Yeah. The way I talk about it with the men I work with a lot is there are alpha men. The idea is that we all need to aspire to become alpha men. That is so damaging to like, I'm not that guy. I never was. And in high school and junior high, my entire life, I developed this concept through movies and friends and the coolest, hottest guy in our class that like got all the girls. Like I just developed this plan that that's who I'm supposed to try to be. And it creates a lot of damaging behavior, and it ruins relationships because you again, it's that mask, that costume you were wearing when we started out talking. You end up trying to be somebody you're not, and it feels disingenuous. So you use drugs and you drink and you do all this other stuff to try to become that person, but you're not it.
Yeah. I think we were talking about sort of the polarity between the two of you because Sophie is on perfection and sacrifice, and you scored higher on Sophie was on harmony and sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you scored higher on rules, logic, and perfection.
No doubt.
Yeah. And those three are actually more of the sort of masculine good girl myths.
Yeah.
They have more of a rigidity to them, whereas the other two are more fluid. So it's interesting to see that. So I was just commenting I imagine there's a lot of polarity between you two because of that.
No.
How long have you been together?
Been together 16 years.
Wow.
And then married for 11.
I love it.
Yeah.
Amazing. So good.
We ask all of our guests 5 questions. So first thing that comes to mind, our listeners love this part, really gets to know you on a deeper level. So first thing that comes to mind for the best advice that you've ever received.
The best advice I've ever received was that my own heart is my teacher, my greatest teacher.
It's beautiful. Do you remember who said that?
It was a man who started a nonprofit in India, in Ahmedabad, and his name is Jayesh Patel. Yeah,
amazing.
a very special person.
What has been one of your most proud moments?
I would say the first one that came to my mind was landing my literary agent. Felt like a very I worked so hard and I found someone who believes in me enough to represent this idea. It was really, really a proud moment.
And not an easy one. On the flip side of that, what has been one of your hardest moments?
What has been one of my hardest moments? Gosh, there have been so many. I think in the creative process of writing the book, the proposal took 1 year and 4 months. And there was a moment towards the end where I thought I wasn't going to make it. I was just like, I've sunk in 1 year and 4 months to this. I think I should just quit and I should fire my agent, and this is shit and I should burn it. I just had a really, really, I'm speaking specifically about a tough moment in the creative process, honing in on that. But we came out the other side somehow.
I think there's a lesson here, by the way, and I believe strongly in this, that some of the biggest achievements you will ever achieve for all of us happen right after you get the option to quit. It happened to me at the end of grad school, the last year before I finished my PhD program. I was like, I don't know if this is worth it. I'm in deep depression and I'm stressed out all the time. It might be time to quit. And it's you have to find this other gear. And to me, that's the difference. The only difference between the people who write books and people who don't write books are the people who are willing to deal with however long that thought and feeling lasted.
Thank you for saying that. Such a good point.
And in order to do this stuff, in order to show up your coaching, the book, what we find is a lot of people we work with have pretty substantial self-care rituals ways that they are almost like non-negotiables for them to take care of themselves. What's your self-care ritual?
I'm eating every 2 hours and to help with my blood sugar. And that's been really, really like leaning into food and eating enough protein and getting good, healthy fats. It's been self-care for me.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. It also like comes back to our beginning and the beginning of the conversation of everything can be a poison. Everything can be, a healing medicine. Like food is medicine. It can be. Food can be medicine. It sounds like it's serving that role right now for you.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
And then last but not least, this is called Ignited. What ignites you?
Poetry.
I love that.
Do you have a favorite poet?
I have so many. I would say one of my favorite poets is an Argentinian female poet. Her name is Alfonsina Storni. And she was from the 1920s, and she wrote a lot of just beautiful poems. Odes to the moon and odes to the ocean and just really lovely stuff.
Beautiful. Send us a few quotes and we'll share them when you go up.
I would love that.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks to both of you. This was so wonderful. So dynamic. Thank
you for the book. Thank you for putting in that work after that year and 4 months on the proposal. And, for playing this role and following that path of what you found in your little journey that will, I'm sure, enlighten a lot of women on different ways they could live that they never would have imagined otherwise.
Absolutely.
And for everybody listening, do me a favor, follow Majo and screenshot this, give us some input. Even if it's not for you and you're seeing other people in your life who could benefit from these lessons, maybe share it with them. Let them know that this exists so that they can go and learn about the myths and how they're holding them back in their own life.
And Majo, will you share your Instagram handle for us?
Sure. It's my name @Majo Molfino. My name is spelled with a J. So it's MAJO, and then you'll find me.
There you go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have an amazing day.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.